things work better when we are all trying to be rational, to be evidence-based, to respect other people's freedoms, to be compassionate, all of these good things. Things work better when we are actively trying to do that than when we are not.
Today, I'm speaking with British liberal humanist writer and social commentator Helen Pluckrose. Helen is the co-author with James Lindsay of Cynical Theories, Social Injustice, and author of the Counterweight Handbook, about principled strategies for surviving and defeating critical social justice at work, in schools, and beyond. At university, Helen studied late medieval women's religious writing. Her work now focuses on critiques of postmodernist philosophies, critical social justice scholarship and activism, and their negative effects on the humanities and the political left. With James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, Helen was instrumental in the now famous Grievance Studies Affairs, which exposed the dubious scholarship in academic fields captured by postmodernism, critical theory, and identity politics. They succeeded in publishing a number of fake, hoax papers in academic journals. The project was inspired by Alan Sokal's 1996 hoax paper he published in the academic journal Social Text. From 2018 to 2021, Helen was the editor-in-chief of Ario, an online magazine focusing on politics, culture, science and art. You can read her current writings on her Substack called The Overflowings of a Liberal Brain. It was a great honour to talk to Helen, but unfortunately, the gods responsible for audio recording equipment had it in for me that day. Although Helen's audio recorded perfectly, tragically my microphone completely and utterly failed. So I've had to cobble together my recording from the low-quality camera microphones with additional enhancing help from our AI friends. Thankfully, I was able to resurrect it, although I will need your patience as the AI enhancement makes me sound rather robotic. Happily, you'll be able to enjoy the pearls of wisdom from the great Helen Pluckrose in high fidelity. And now I give you Helen Pluckrose.
Welcome to the Shape of Dialogue, Helen. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've beamed you in live from London, and this is the first podcast I've ever done out of New Zealand. So this is an historic moment, so thank you so much.
Welcome to London.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Now, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things, but why don't we start with your origin story, to quote, Lawrence Krauss. So you started studying medieval women's writing from 1300, 1700?
Yep.
And how did you, give me the through line of how did you get from there to talking about postmodernism and wokeism and all those sorts of things, and then ending up espousing liberal values?
Well, when I started, my undergraduate was straightforwardly in English literature, and I was a mature student. I was 34 when I did this, and so in the very first module was about the difference between liberal humanism and theory, and why liberal humanism is bad and why theory is good. And our first exam, essentially, it had to we had to kind of write about how theory can address things better and why liberal humanism is that doesn't work at all. And at this point, I sort of think, I really am a liberal humanist. And the second module was then about postmodernism, and we had to do a postmodern analysis of a text. And by this time, having read everything about it, I was pretty sure that I hated it, and so I got permission to write a critique. I got permission to write an introduction, which is for my own integrity, which essentially said, everything I say after this point is going to be complete nonsense. And as we went through, and I kept having to apply theory to things rather than looking at history, which was my interest at postgrad at masters. I did 1300 to 1700, and I focused on religious writing by and for and about women. And this was it just really got in the way of looking at things in the way that I wanted to look at them. It was anachronistic. I wanted to look at how people thought and felt at that time. I didn't want to go back looking at things through the prism of intersectional feminism, post-colonial theory, queerness. It just it was just an anachronistic mess, and it really cared very little for what is true. If you look at how literary theory works when it's heavily based on theory, it's essentially asking you to pick a certain lens and then read everything using confirmation bias. And I don't think that is a good thing. So I was getting more and more irritated with the foundations of postmodern theory, the denial of objective truth, the belief that everything is culturally constructed, it's done so politically in the service of the powerful. And at the same time that I was getting really very frustrated with this, my own liberal feminism, which I have always, I was going to be a feminist historian. This was the plan. And my liberal feminism, which had always focused on how women are complete and full human beings who should have individual autonomy and who are as good as, no better than men. And it just started going seriously off the rails as it was introducing sort of intersectional politics, when it was then dividing what we can all know by our racial identity. It was completely, the thing that was frustrating me most was that it was absolutely ignoring the issues faced by Muslim women and Muslim feminists as they were trying to point out genuinely patriarchal and oppressive beliefs within their subculture. They were really just being flattened with no, this is colonialist. We mustn't do that. We must look at sort of experiencing everything as misogyny and how the power dynamics are working. And Muslim feminists, particularly Dia Khan, at one point, this was the tipping point for me. She did a wonderful a documentary on honour violence, and as a result of it, she had a plan that she wanted to put to government that had 5 steps for women to be able to report that they were in danger, for the authorities to respond to this effectively, for addressing the issues in communities that really would have helped a lot of British women. She put out
a lot of British Muslim women.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She put out a petition for this, and it got something like 600 signatures. At the same time, there was a really trashy petition going out on Change that wanted to change the law so that anything that is perceived as misogyny is misogyny and becomes a hate crime. Hundreds of thousands of signatures, and I felt, well, what are we doing here? How is this working? And so I linked what was happening within activism, which it quite clearly was, with these postmodern ideas that had sort of gone into queer theory, critical race theory, and how they were really poisoning what I would say is that liberal imperative to treat people as individuals, to oppose all forms of prejudice and discrimination. And so they kind of came together.
Right. So it's, in a sense, you couldn't study what you wanted to study.
No.
But as a result, you were forced to study these liberal ideas, and that's led you here. Yeah, it's very interesting. Just as an interesting aside, who was Amelia Lanier?
Amelia Lanier, she was excellent. She was a gentlewoman of London. She was of Italian origin. She wrote a very, very long poem arguing very much tongue-in-cheek that because women's rights had always been denied on the grounds of the sin of Eve, Eve was tricked into eating the apple. This therefore means that women's judgment can't be trusted. They're flexible. They tempt men into doing bad things. They shouldn't have any positions of power. She wrote an epic poem essentially arguing that men were responsible for killing Christ, and she wasn't going to hold that against them, so let's let bygones be bygones.
All things being equal.
Yes. And she got into that a lot of focus on women's wisdom. It was really quite essentialist, but she was making an argument that men who have this sort of scholarly bent. Women, she's saying, we're not claiming to be scholars like men. We have a more innate natural wisdom, which was how the Christian narrative went at the time. Men were associated with the mind, women with the body, women sort of intuition and feeling, men sort of wisdom and intellect, and obviously I object to that as well. But she was taking the narrative in which she was living and saying this is not a reason not to value women's knowledge. So I used her as an example of how women could negotiate authority and autonomy for themselves within this system.
Yes, so she's using the paradigm to argue against itself.
Yes.
Which is that what you've done?
Well, that's what I've looked at. I've looked at how women use different Christian narratives sort of before and after the Reformation in order to, say, stop disparaging the input of women.
And again, I can't help asking this question. It's off topic, but we'll keep on going. To what extent? Maybe I'll do it bluntly. Were women oppressed in those days?
Yes,
yeah.
They were. I mean,
to what extent?
People who say that patriarchy didn't exist are wrong. The system that arose, you can make good arguments that women were not necessarily individually oppressed. They were not necessarily unhappy. But I think the best way to understand patriarchy is to think of it as changing the relationship between men and women to the relationship between parent and child. So when women can't own things for themselves, when they can't make decisions for themselves, they are very, very vulnerable to the whims of their husband. So if you are a child who has loving parents who love you, who respect you, who see you, who want you to be happy, you could be very happy in a patriarchy, assuming you didn't want to be a political leader or run a guild or do anything like that. You could be happy. But if you didn't have these aims and you really just wanted to have a nice life and your husband was wonderful, great. If your husband was not wonderful, there was very little you could do about it. If he was directly abusive, if he was giving you a black eye every day, if he was not allowing you food, then community justice would step in. Other men.
Right. Right, because I've heard of that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. Is that so? The community as a whole had the well-being of women as virtue.
Yeah. So if a man was, because people as well lived very close together, if a man was beating his wife all the time, the men would probably beat him up. Mm-hmm. The church, in extreme situations of abuse, may give a woman permission to leave.
So there were protective measures.
There were, but
that's not like what we have today.
No, if a man was not being directly abusive, if he was just, say, not letting his wife leave the house.
Generally oppressive.
Yeah, if he was giving her lots of work to do and then beating her with a stick a few times every night for not doing that, he would be considered a strict husband. Right. But he would not be contravening those bounds. So a woman in that situation would really have nowhere to go, because he would still be considered a good man, and other women might say, oh, her husband's very strict, I'm glad mine's not like that. Mm. But she wouldn't be being seen as being abused. She wouldn't have any form of redress.
It's spare the rod, spare the child type of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what is it, spare?
Yeah, spoil the child.
Spoil the child.
But that is the best way, I think, to really intuitively grasp how a patriarchal system worked, and thinking of women being relegated to children in the care of their husbands as parents.
Okay, well, let's get back onto the tracks. Thank you for that. It's really interesting. The Grievance Studies hoax. What were they all about? And why did you do it?
Well, they're sort of less well understood as hoaxes, I would say, as a kind of exploration. Mm-hmm. So what we did there was we gathered together a lot of what we considered the worst kind of scholarship, totally politically, socially constructed. It sort of started with its conclusions, then bent theory to fit it. It was bringing together a lot of very fact-free political ideas, which were I would say downright unethical, and producing this scholarship that had prestige and building on that scholarship.
Just one example.
So one of our papers that I think is clearest to see the problem with, it was under revise and resubmit, but it had positive reviews. It used the progressive stack, which is the idea that we all have certain forms of privilege and we all have certain forms of marginalisation, and this governs our knowledge. And so we argued that in classrooms, children or young students, adults, should be assessed for their level of privilege and marginalisation, and then they should be treated as in consequence of that. So if you are a man, then you should be treated as women are supposed to be treated. Every time you raise your hand and you have an opinion, you should be talked over, disbelieved. If you white kids should be on the floor in chains as a form of existential, sort of experiential reparations, and their views shouldn't be held at all. And this would kind of then sort of provide reparations for past oppressions, and it would even things out. And so it's just these kinds of really horrible ideas. And in order to do this, we took existing scholarship that was arguing very similar things. We sort of made it slightly more ridiculous, but not really. We just kind of brought it all together to just, so the average well-intentioned progressive person could read this, and this is, you're justifying a form of horrific abuse here based on some weird ideology that just doesn't seem rooted in reality. And when we submitted it, we worried a bit that suggesting that white children should sit on the floor in chains might go a little bit too far. And so we made an argument there that this would actually be good for them as a learning experience. And the reviewers told us to take that bit out because we were centering white feelings again, and they're white people's needs.
So they should just be axiomatically chained up, and that's fine.
Yes.
We don't have to have a reason to do that.
Yeah, we don't need to justify that at all, because that would be centering the experiences of white people, and that's what the whole problem is. So yeah, we were just doing that sort of repeatedly in different within different arenas. We did frankly ludicrous things like claim to have observed 10,000 dog genitals in 3 dog parks in one town, and then to have interrogated the owners about their sexuality and reported on their observations of dog humping, then for no reason whatsoever applied black feminist criminology to this, and then concluded that dog parks are rape condoning spaces, so nightclubs also are, and men could benefit from being trained like dogs, possibly with shock collars. And that one got an award for exceptional scholarship.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah, so we did have a lot of fun in there. It's those ones that tend to be remembered, but there are more sort of subtle papers in there. They're just pure theory papers, which are actually really more worrying.
So when you say theory, you really just mean completely made up?
Yeah, I mean the sets of ideas that have come from the postmodern premises.
Right. Yes. So no, you weren't making them up out of your own creativity. You were basing them on postmodernist theory.
Yeah, we did exactly what the scholars did. We took what we called the postmodern knowledge principle, the postmodern political principle as axioms, and then applied the different methods to it, the existing theories that were already well developed, and we used them to argue for pretty much anything horrible that we could. Now, quite a lot has been made of our rewriting of Mein Kampf. And
just explain that.
Well, sometimes,
as being a half Jewish person, I love that. I did.
Sometimes people take that. They read that wrongly. They think that what we did was that we just took a chunk of Mein Kampf and we removed Jews and put in men. and essentially left it the same, which to some extent we did. But what we were testing ourselves with was the hypothesis we can make the theory bend to absolutely anything. This idea that we start with our conclusion and then we make theory bend to fit it. And then somebody said, well, what about Mein Kampf? Could you make it fit that? And
so in a sense, you took the most extreme piece of literature. Right.
So we had the chunk of Mein Kampf, but what we had to do before that was write a big, long, mesh together all these theories. That was a real brain-aching one, we had to bring things together from second wave feminism, from intersectional feminism, from queer theory, and kind of patchwork it all together so that it led up to something that still had this totalitarian, men are a contaminant, we need to free society from them. And what we did to make sure that we hadn't gone, because some people have read it and said, but this isn't the same thing, because you've put men in there and then you've put this other stuff in here. You've changed it. It's not the same. So what we wanted to do, there was an analysis tool at the time, a psychological analysis tool, which you put in a chunk of writing and it would analyse the personality. So we put in Mein Kampf and we sort of got the readout from that, and then everything that we wrote and added to it, we put it through the same tool to make sure that the psychological sort of ethical moral things was exactly the same. It was the same voice, and so that we weren't kind of as Jim has said ironically, something, there are no good parts of Mein Kampf, but we wanted to.
That's what a shopper's day. Well, enough about Mein Kampf. First time I've talked about Mein Kampf on this podcast. Now, I typed into our AI. Well, I got this list from our AI gods. The list of, I just typed in, what are all the critical theories? I'm going to read them out to you. It's a big long list. And I want you to tell me what is the best term that can encapsulate or describe all of them in one term. Because often what I find in discussion, I say postmodernism, and they say, well, structuralism's different from postmodernism. And because I'm not an expert, thankfully I haven't had to read any of this stuff, it's actually very hard to comment on that. So here we go. This is what came from their AI gods. Postmodernism, existentialism, phenomenology, structuralism, postcolonialism, feminist theory, Marxist theory, queer theory, intersectionality, wokeism, fat studies, critical theory, which is the Frankfurt School, critical race theory, critical social justice, critical legal theory, critical disability theory, critical pedagogy, critical whiteness studies, cultural studies, critical environmental theory, and my favourite of all, critical animal studies. So when I'm talking about this, what term should I use to encapsulate all of them? And is that even wrong? Is that wrong to even think there would be a term?
Well, I don't think that they're not all in the same family. So Marxism is a thing on its own. It has an ancestral influence, but it's not part of the postmodern collection. It's the same with the critical theory of the Frankfurt School. The bits of that have been stolen as well. Other that you mentioned earlier, did you say existential?
Existentialism.
Yeah. So that's not in there at all.
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah, no. So what's
not in what? Not in
it's not. No, it's not in the.
But is there a through line? So I mean,
There is.
Recently did a podcast with James Lindsay, and I called it communism to wokeism pipeline. So his theory is that there is a through line, a direct through line from each one to the other. And I got a lot of feedback saying, no, James is wrong, blah, blah, blah. So is there a through line or not?
There is a through line.
And also, do you agree with James or not?
No. There is a through line in the same way. I always think a good analogy is saying that there is with Judaism and Christianity. So you've got those core texts, those core sort of...
And Islam as well, because that draws on the same.
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes, but for this we'll keep it simple and we'll just have those two. If we've got Judaism as the base of things, we can think of Marxism as that, but then a couple of thousand years later, then we have a divergence. We have the rise of Christianity. It changes the Jewish story. It takes it that there is a Messiah, but he's come now. There's a new covenant. It goes off in an entirely different direction, but it maintains some of the same core stories. But if you tried to criticize Christianity by criticizing Judaism, you would miss the main point, which is Christ. And you would miss the direction in which it has gone, because Christianity essentially they claim to continue Judaism, but it really did take it somewhere else. So you will get Christians who will say, yes, these Jewish texts are authoritative, but absolutely no Jews will say these Christian texts are authoritative. And this is how things are with Marxism and postmodernism and wokeness. So you will get a lot of the woke activists saying we are Marxists, and then they will bring in aspects of Marxism, but you will get no Marxists saying, traditional Marxists saying, yes, these woke people are absolutely Marxists. They will be saying, no, they have now taken this off into some neoliberal
reservations.
Yes, they're focusing on identity. They're dividing the working class. They're not dealing with class issues at all. This is nothing to do. This is not us.
Well, what about this idea? Can you have wokeism or postmodernism or Frankfurt School if Marxism had never existed?
No, in the same way you would not have Christianity if Marxism hadn't. The through line there, I would say, is on the word critical. That critical in the sense of Marx said we want to criticize all the things that exist.
So sort of it's a negative prism. There's a negative lens.
Yeah, so with the word critical, generally we have a sense of either being negative about something, or we have critical thinking in which we analyze things. The critical in Marxism, in postmodernism, in wokeism is this form of critical consciousness, which accepts that certain oppressive power structures exist, and then it uses that lens to criticize everything else.
Except for themselves.
Yes, so we see that in the Marxist tradition, they're reading everything through a class structure lens.
Well, I've got it written down here, oppressor dichotomy.
Yes, and then you've got the Frankfurt School, who took this into the cultural realm. They're still using quite a lot of the structure of Marxism, but they've moved away from class. So they would be what the Marxists, particularly the Northites, would call the pseudo-left now, because they're no longer focusing on class. Then the postmodernists arose, and they explicitly in the late 60s criticised Marxism. So Derrida in Spectre of Marx writes, one thing that is clear is that I am not a Marxist. They were disillusioned by Marxism. They felt it was a meta-narrative, that it had failed, it didn't cover everything. And so they really quite radically diverged from it, but they still had the spirit of it.
Well, what I find remarkable, and you correct me if I'm wrong, every one of these philosophers is from the left. That's correct. There's no right-wing postmodernists.
Well, there are, but
and Foucault. Oh, there are.
Yes, there's the libertarians, particularly the right-wing libertarians. Thaddeus Russell is a libertarian, a postmodernist, and if you have a look at some of his stuff, you can see him bringing in a lot of the sort of postmodern thought, which lends itself to libertarianism and that kind of radical skepticism.
Yeah, but they're few and far between, I imagine.
Yeah,
the main thinkers of Marxism et al. On the left.
Yes, but of course, then other people would argue that the critical social justice movement is not left if you understand left as being about the interests of the working class. And so that they would say, and they'd have a point, which I have argued as well, that the woke movement is very much a sort of middle class elite thing, that it is funded by corporations, it relies on capitalism, it kind of perpetuates this sort of neoliberal, packaged up and labelled approach to social justice that doesn't actually help anything. So they would say this is not left. The left cannot be blamed for this. I would say they are wrong. That we do. I'm left. That we do have to take responsibility for this. This did emerge as a collection and a distortion of left-wing intellectual philosophical thought. We may think that it has gone completely wrong, but it does have a lot of the same drivers. The care harm, if we're going with Haidt's moral foundations analysis, the care harm, the equality foundations, it's trying to do those same things. It's trying to even up an idea of social justice using this particular left-wing thought. So those of us on the left who don't like postmodernism and wokeism, we need to say not that this isn't left, this is some really conservative thing. That's what a lot of people have always argued, particularly with Foucault, that he is conservative.
Really?
I mean, there were times in his own life in which he was considered to be very much moving in conservative circles, but his thought isn't. It's coming from a deconstructive, systemizing left-wing thought. So we have to own that. We just have to say it's going wrong, in the same way that ethical conservatives should not, I would argue, as some of them are doing now, look at some of the sort of ethno-nationalists, the populists, who are really very post-truth. I would say they are very postmodern in their things. So when we're talking about the woke right, they're not postmodern theorists. They're not putting it out there like that, but they are postmodern.
So it's, I mean, what strikes me about wokeism is sort of the sense of grievance and focusing on victimhood. Are you saying that the so-called woke right are doing the same thing?
Yes, and sometimes they're doing it explicitly. So we see with the Christian nationalists, Neil Shenvi has been covering this well. They're drawing directly from postmodern theorists and saying that this is a good thing. Chris Rufo's latest book is he's basing it on, I can't remember actually, but it's based on Gramsci and his idea of cultural hegemony. And Rufo argues that we need to take Gramscian ideas, the long march through the institutions, the changing of culture. So some are doing it explicitly, but in others, then we just see invisible systems of power and privilege that are being forced on everybody. There is an underclass. They've changed the privileged for the elites.
Yes. We have elites and the rest of us.
Yes, and then straight white men are at the bottom because everything is set up to, and people aren't seeing this because they're brainwashed by media, and so they have to speak truth to power. They're asking for a kind of critical consciousness again, for people to wake up, to be red-pilled in some cases, which is exactly the same as woke.
Same as critical consciousness, isn't it?
Yes, so this is very much a postmodern development, and James Lindsay has been particularly good on pointing this out. I was a little late to it.
He's just done recent hoax, hasn't he? But for the woke right.
He did one a while back. Has he done another one in the last?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Much about it, yeah.
I thought you'd have told me. But no, he is really. We disagree somewhat on the influences of Marxism and that. But when I was late to recognising the rise of the woke right because I was focusing on the left. But once I did see how it was working, I said yes, Jim would absolutely notice that. He would break it down. He would set it out in the way that he has. And now I've been writing about it a lot. And you're just influenced by James Lindsay. No, we wrote this years ago. We set out these two principles, we set out these four themes, we said how it all worked. It would be extremely strange and we would be utterly lacking in integrity and consistency if we did not see this rise on the right and diagnose it in the same way.
So I just want to drill down on this thing with James Lindsay. You're saying you disagree with him on that sort of direct connection, but it sounds like there is, at basis, there is a fundamental agreement.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask Jim directly, is wokeness the view of traditional Marxists, he would say no, and he would be able to point you to a lot of ongoing criticisms by Marxists, starting with Chomsky versus Foucault, right into the current day. He's published on New Discourses a thing by me about it. So we don't disagree there. And I think that there are grounds to say that Marxism is having a more direct influence on the woke right. They are directly quoting the Frankfurt School and socialist principles, whereas the woke left have gone kind of, because where they've gone postmodern, they've drifted from the material to the ideal. They're no longer trying to change like material systems. They're trying to change minds and hearts. And so they're a little bit different. So Jim and I, when we speak about this, we find that when we drill down into the details, we don't disagree so much. But I think that it's important to keep that distinction from Marxism and postmodernism, because I think it's usually in good faith people are confusing the two, because it is simpler, to just kind of say, well, here's this oppressed oppressor narrative, and it was oppressed to class, now it's oppressed to identity. I can grasp that. Postmodernism isn't so easily graspable. But if you do that, then you miss how power works. Marxists believe that it knowingly presses down. The oppressor group know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to oppress the lower group. Now, the postmodernists don't believe this. You see this in the populist right as well. They believe that the elites know exactly what they're doing. The postmodernists don't believe this. They believe in a conspiracy theory that power works through all of us unconsciously. We have just internalized these systems, and then we speak into them and we perpetuate them. So we need to dismantle them like that. That is a very different way of seeing things.
Yeah.
The Marxists believed that language could be used to communicate straightforwardly. Marx believed that philosophy was the way to liberate the working classes. They believe in the dialectic. The postmodernists don't. They believe that everything is just fed into discourses. Language is essentially meaningless, but it is constructed in a way to pursue these power structures. So dismantling language is important to them as well. They don't believe in the power of debates, for example, but bad ideas being beaten by better ones. And that is also sort of very important to understand. So
can I just interrupt you? So I find that quite hard to grasp. So I just want to drill down on it. So the postmodernists are saying that they're trying to deconstruct language because embedded in the way we use language, and the language itself, are power structures.
Yes.
Right.
So that's the
difference. They're using, this is what I don't get, and yet they're using language.
Yes. So
you can't have it both ways.
Well, you can, because what they do, they say, well, look, everything is a discourse. Everything is essentially socially constructed. So we accept this, and then we use our discourses because they are better. So you will see somebody like Alison Bailey writing in Critical Pedagogy that the critical social justice approach is not about establishing things and examining things for truth. We can't get at truth. So what we do is we look at how power structures are going in this narrative. Then we have our own narratives which dismantle that and seek to sort of perpetuate better narratives. So they've taken this idea that we've got meta narratives which are oppressing us, and so we need to. The first wave just wanted to deconstruct everything. It didn't have a reconstructing aim.
So what does deconstruct mean?
So you just kind of nitpick at things until it makes no sense and it falls apart. It's
what's the goal though?
There wasn't one. With the original postmodernists in the late 60s, early 70s, they were very, very disillusioned. they felt that the grand narratives that they had held to, which included Marxism and science and reason, the notions of progress, also Christianity was they took aim at that. These had all fallen apart under scrutiny. Nobody had any faith in them. They hadn't worked.
We're talking what years?
The late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
So they said there's now a profound scepticism.
This is why we were putting men on the moon.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah. Just as
they hadn't worked in wild economic.
Yeah, and exactly.
Just gone through the roof. More and more people coming out of poverty. More and more people in the world were free. More and more democracy.
The 2 decades.
None of that had worked.
No, the 2 decades in which we were decriminalising homosexuality, ensuring that women and people of racial minority had equal access to all jobs. This is when this is when they suddenly got disillusioned and said nothing is working, and so they saw some kind of liberation in deconstructing everything, making a nonsense of it, really just nitpicking on the level of the word to make everything into soup. They didn't see anything that really productive that could come of this. You could just be less brainwashed. And of course, a lot of them...
Right, so it's cynical. Look, we can do nothing about it, but we can criticise it, but we're all...
Yeah.
Excuse my French, but we're all fact.
Yes, essentially. That they and some of them, that'd be like Deleuze, committed suicide, and they really were.
What do you think about Deleuze, by the way?
Oh, well, he was just mad, wasn't he? Yeah. So I read quite a lot of him for a while, and it really exploded my brain. He's not. I don't focus too much on him because he's not commonly cited. He's like Baudrillard, he was more of a critic of the state of postmodernity rather than an advocate of kind of wallowing in it, and so he's not so.
But does any of it make sense?
Well, you could certainly say.
What's he about? I mean, I listened to one of those audiobooks. You know, the audiobook about that.
Listen, are you a masochist?
I couldn't read it because it's hard to listen to it. So it just. I can't. Is there a there?
Well, I think there is. You can say, and I think people are saying it again right now with the rise of AI and things that we have gone into a stage where things have become more artificial, where it's all about consumerism, it's about hedonism.
That's what he was saying, was it?
Yes, I mean he focused more on the kind of the capitalist. Approach to things. I think Baudrillard is the one who's really kind of taken the current mood more clearly when he's looking at the artificiality of things. To Deleuze, we're all coded into various class structures, and then capitalism is working through us, and everything is really getting fragmented and falling apart. And with Baudrillard as well, he was looking at that kind of artificiality, the simulations of things, where we're coming away from anything that is real. We're just kind of building structures on structures now and living in these castles.
Nice. So it's artificiality on artificiality.
Yes, so we get a lot of the post-liberals who are not postmodern, who are using Baudrillard now. And they're kind of saying, well, we have moved away from the real. We are in this postmodern, post-liberal phase,
right.
where
someone like John Gray, he'd be described as a post-liberal.
Yeah, he certainly touches on that, more of the sort of the Deneen and Hazeney, where we just got this real sort of skepticism of
it just hasn't worked.
Yeah,
it hadn't worked. And we just got to live with that and deal with that.
Yeah, and they're really very concerned about the development of technology. I think Mary Harrington is a very good example of somebody who really brings this together well. She said she wants us not to go back to the 1950s, but to the 1450s, because.
Why is that?
Because we have just got so much now into this sort of capitalist consumerist society where we're
very disconnected. We're alienated from ourselves.
Yes, I kind of imagine whenever I'm reading her, a bit like Marie Antoinette's sort of simulated village where she had this lovely clean sheep and everybody dancing around.
Exactly.
This kind of idyllic.
Yeah, it's romanticised misery.
Yes.
Or romanticising absolute poverty and misery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a bit like the arts and crafts movement as well, which sort of revitalised traditional medieval styles and woodworking techniques, and it's great. It looks beautiful in your nice rich house.
Yes, it can certainly be a lot of fun to play with, but there are people who really feel that liberalism itself has failed, and science and reason, and as the postmodernists did, but they're not so they haven't taken it into a radically skeptical of objective knowledge thing. They just want to close in. They see individuality as narcissism, and they see growth as a just kind of losing all community and cohesion. They want to sort of bring things into sort of shared narratives, make things simpler again. So you get this kind of attitude from the post-liberals, which is very closely mapped on to those of the postmodernists who are better described as critics of postmodernity. They see a state of postmodernity that we're living in, they are critical of it. And that the French postmodernists that I looked at mostly, which are Foucault, Lyotard, Derrida, they are those who have taken this idea of postmodernism, this rejection of meta-narratives, rejection of objective truth, believing that everything is constructed in systems of power and privilege, and then they have got quite excited about it and wanted to use it to deconstruct everything, make people more aware that they're living in this matrix kind of thing. And at least then they won't be falling for it so much. But then the next wave in the around 1990, they said, well, this isn't good enough. We can't just keep pulling things apart and leaving it in a mess on the floor. We have to reconstruct things, and we have to find a way to use this for activism. So a lot of theorists appeared from different areas, particularly Kimberly Crenshaw in critical race theory, but and then in post-colonial theory there was Linda Hutchin, and all these people just coming out and saying, right, okay, these postmodernists, they're mostly straight white men and they're happy to deconstruct everything, but that's because society already works quite well for them. We need to reconstruct things. We keep everything as a social construct. We accept that one thing is real, it's systems of oppression, and then we form a kind of activism to create new narratives, to sort of penalise these old narratives and set up new narratives and teach people to dismantle their old narratives and take on these new ones, and then we can actually make progress. And then in around 2010, these different theories just kind of melded into one. There was no longer a pretense that this wasn't a meta-narrative. We've seen the language of truth and subjective truth come back. If you read someone like Robin DiAngelo, she will be saying it is objectively true, this is a fact. And she will be saying that...
So that's really postmodern.
Yes.
Yes.
And they would not say they were postmodern. Right. They would absolutely deny being postmodern. And so this is when you have to actually say, well, okay, where are your sources here? Is this not Foucault? And you have to kind of trace it back. And that was what cynical theories did. We started at the end.
That's, just to be clear, that's your book you wrote with James.
Yes. We started at what we see now, and then we traced the citations back, we traced the influences back. So we could say, you are doing postmodernism, you have distorted it, twisted it, that the original postmodernists would not approve, but you have now a meta-narrative which essentially says these systems of power and privilege exist, they work in discourses, they influence biases, we need to deconstruct them, reconstruct something else, and put it in place.
Yeah. Going back to this through line from Marx's onwards, I mean, I read half of the Communist Manifesto. I couldn't bear it any longer. It seemed to be the most stupid thing I've ever read in my life. But what struck me about Marx, and again, I'm not a Marx expert, but it's the school of making things up without ever testing whether they're true or not. And when they fail, of not taking that into account. Now, that seems to be the case in all of these theories that we're talking about. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but this is a sort of a symptom of ideology rather than, I would say, particularly left-wing ideology. For example, I just wrote a piece criticising something written by a Christian conservative, in which she was essentially claiming that real theocracy had never been tried, and that we
like real Marxism.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So she's saying, if we get it into the state, into the institutions, and we bring everybody into it, and we do it properly, it will all work beautifully.
If we lived in utopia, it would be
yes.
Yeah. Let's get on to the Enlightenment, which is much more fun. I imagine you are an Enlightenment proponent.
I am.
Through and through.
Yes, and I think.
Why? Well, first of all, really briefly, what's the Enlightenment about? What are liberal values? Why are they the best prescription? Or why? Maybe you don't use the word best. Why do they work in terms of bringing about human flourishing?
So if we look at the state of things in the late medieval period, we had people who were really having to think everything through a Christian narrative and through a structure of society based on dynastic rule with layers of classes within it. People were required to see themselves as in the terms of Christianity, and then slotted within certain roles in life. Your role as a woman, your role as a serf, your role as a... And so there was this really kind of collectivist understanding. That's not to say people didn't fight against that. They did, but usually within its own narrative. So we've got 45,000 denominations of Christianity now.
45.
Yes. So they were doing this. But what happened to change this? First of all, the Renaissance arose, where there was some sort of flourishing of art and culture. There was a rediscovery of Greek philosophy. There was an understanding that we don't have to read everything through these this one sort of Christian narrative. It is okay to have knowledge of other kind. We can expand things. At the same time, we saw the Reformation, and this made a shift from what is true is dictated by the church, and who will interpret the Bible for you. And now people became able to read and interpret for themselves. And so they still had to be Christian, obviously, but there was suddenly a recognition of the individual as somebody who could use their own mind, make their own decisions, evaluate ideas, see what it really meant. At the same time as we had the Renaissance doing this idea of the multifaceted man, the individual, who could explore all these different things. So these two developments were happening, and that they birthed what was called Renaissance humanism, which birthed what became known as the Enlightenment, as people started to think, well, I can be an individual spiritually, I can be an individual artistically, I can be an individual scientifically, I can do all of these things. The Enlightenment arose to kind of say, well, okay, so how are we going to work this within society? So there was so much at that time religious factionism, religious fighting of people saying my narrative is real, no, my narrative is real, and there was a general kind of exhaustion culturally. I look mostly at England.
Which year? Which one?
Looking really sort of what we call the early modern period. So right from sort of inklings of it in the middle of the 16th century, really sort of growing, escalating, different sort of timescales in different countries.
Still the Treaty of Westphalia around that time? The Treaty of Westphalia around that time? Do you know that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that very well.
I think it's 16 something or other, yeah.
But this was part of a kind of snowballing that was happening, and it manifested very differently, of course, in countries that stayed Catholic, and in countries in Northern Europe which did not take on so much of the artistic stuff. So things were very different. There was this growing, what marks the modern from the medieval, how we determine that a vibe shift has happened here, that we can draw a line here, was this idea that the individual can be a rational agent, that they should be a rational agent, that they don't have to buy into narratives. So this is the original, and earlier.
In a sense, you don't have to do what you're told to a certain extent.
Yes, you have a mind of your own. And so it was a scepticism towards meta-narratives. And this is what I always argue when the postmodernists claim they invented this. No, what was happening in the Renaissance, the Reformation, in the Enlightenment? People were saying we have been, and there was quite a naivety in that and a bit smug at times. They would say we have been lost in these narratives of superstition, and now we are perfectly rational agents and we can just, well, no, you can't. You're still apes, you're still tribal territorial apes. You're going to use motivated reasoning, you're going to use confirmation bias, you're going to like stories more than
ironically they suffered from the same thing that we all have suffered from at all time and will continue to do.
Yes, they were over optimistic about the power of human reason and individual reason.
It's interesting because it seems to be a through line in our discussion of these topics that the humans will find a new theory, in inverted commas, and then they will be endlessly enthusiastic about it without seeing any of its faults or being aware of the constraints of that theory.
They are, but I think we also have to think that with the Enlightenment thinkers, we've got the benefit of hindsight now. We can look back at what they were arguing and think, well, that was a little naive, because we have now had the benefit of living in a society that was a liberal democracy, which is based on that epistemology.
What I'm saying is I don't think we will ever free ourselves from the forms of naivety that we have as humans. Even now, with all, there's just something to be mindful of with all our knowledge.
But this is where the liberalism comes in. Because we have this Enlightenment rationalism evidence, the growth, the scientific revolution, and then we have liberalism arising, which is actually much more humble, which is saying we have got all of these people with these different ideas. And Jonathan Haidt puts it best. He says that the one thing that people are good at is arguing for what they already believe and spotting the flaws in what they don't believe. So if we can set up a system in which we bring all these people together who believe different things, and we allow some of them to disconfirm the beliefs of others, we let them kind of knock off each other's sort of idealistic corners and work as a property of the system, good reasoning can emerge as a property of this system. No individual reasoner is or set of ideas, it's not going to be that all the best
no one's an authority in a sense.
Yeah. And Marxists are not going to have the solution. Conservatives are not going to have it. Christians are not going to have it. Nobody is going to have it. They will all bring things and put them on the table, and they can be knocked together with other things, and then certain good things will arise out of this that can be...
Yeah, so in a sense, there's a sort of a network effect of how we find the so-called truth.
How we get closer to that. So I would say, for example, a lot of my thought, some of it does come from Marxism, because that has had some pretty good critiques of capitalism and of postmodernism. And then some of it will come from conservative thought, which it has kind of looked at this incremental progress, that why do we need to conserve certain things? They have worked well. Let's be sure that there's
a reason for them to be there.
Yes, so we think of this. We have some solid values that are coming from the Christian tradition. All of these different things we can bring together, and nobody is ever going to take the same collection of them. But as the system sort of works, then what we do end up with, and people who want everything to be perfect are dissatisfied by this, but I would just say that if things work better when we are all trying to be rational, to be evidence-based, to respect other people's freedoms, to be compassionate, all of these good things. Things work better when we are actively trying to do that than when we are not.
And that is provable.
It is absolutely the fact.
So it's not just this random theory.
Yeah.
That you're from the sort of making things up. Yeah. So we can actually prove that more people are coming out of poverty every day, that women's lives are better,
Yes.
We all had more autonomy and freedom than we did 500 years ago, even possibly 100 years ago.
When people who doubt, who are very, very critical of liberalism, and they say that they want to protect Western civilization, I think we've got a conflict here. What is it about this part of the world that we have made huge scientific advances, we have made advances in human rights, in freedom, equality, in so many things. You want to preserve this. What defines Western civilization to you that you want to preserve? Because if it is just a religious heritage, then why not Iran? Why not Iran? Why
Iran? Sorry, yes.
Yeah. So we are looking at the evidence is in that we as societies, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, have done very much better on human thriving than other
on every metric.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there are lots of bad things within our society.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, nothing is perfect.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when I'm writing and I want to say, well, I'm not saying that absolutely everything is better here, and then I'll think of what things do cultures that don't have that liberal thing. Well, I think they often do better with a sort of family cohesion. They like to sort of take care of elderly parents. They'll have this family structure in there. Yes. Yeah. You can pick various things that liberal democracies and our current modern culture lacks, which might be better to have more of. But as a general rule, there is a reason that a lot of people are trying to move here, and there is even among the most sort of religious conservatives, there is no mass exodus to other countries that are.
And there are no rich, white, elite people who subscribe to all these woke ideas running to live in Saudi Arabia or Iran,
no,
or Ethiopia or Somalia.
But you really have to be deliberately obtuse, I think, to both value what you call Western civilization and disparage the Enlightenment and the evolution of liberal democracies.
Yes. Is there I can't think of a better word, but I'll use it, it's not quite right, but a fundamental flaw in liberalism, because within liberalism we have the right and the potential to criticise liberalism. And so if you see a culture like Russia, there's no criticism of the reigning order, the reigning regime. But I had a conversation with Catherine Birbal-Singh, the great headmistress, and she said, her work is so hard. In the 50s, she would have been a great headmistress doing great work. Now she's not only has to be a great headmistress, but she has to be a political figure fighting what I called in the podcast the forces of doom, just to be able to maintain what she's already achieved, let alone grow out. So is there this sort of ironical flaw in liberalism?
Well, I'm not quite sure how those two things go together. I would say that in the 50s we were still very much working on Enlightenment thing. And
yes, just to be clear, she's not saying we should go back to the 50s. I was just giving it as an example of.
Do you think we are more liberal now than then?
Well, yes, I'm saying, I'm all for liberalism. I can't get more liberal than me. But what I'm saying is I'm just fascinated where what I see to be completely irrational ideas have an enormous effect. Like I've people say to me often, why are you so interested in postmodernism? No one cares about that. That was in the 90s or the 80s. But when you talk to someone like Catherine Birbal-Singh, you hear the stories of the education system, and also the education system in New Zealand, what recently the previous Labour government tried to do, which just, as I've done millions of podcasts on it, so I won't explain it, but just absolute madness. There are these, what I see, very irrational forces that have instantiating themselves within institutions and within institutional leadership. Now that can sort of only happen in a sense in a liberal society.
Okay, so I think that where I've got confused is that there are two things here that perhaps the root of what you're pointing out is that we cannot guarantee that in a marketplace of ideas, the ideas that win out will be the most logical, reasonable, liberal. Sometimes we're not driven. We are not, in fact, purely rational agents. We do like narratives. It's very likely that an attractive narrative will come up. People will jump on it, and that is what will win out over something that
like
would be.
How can you be anti-racism?
Yeah. So that is what will come. But what I would say to this is that liberalism as an approach is kind of working on that. So if you've got these different narratives, we cannot guarantee that bad ideas are not going to get precedence. But we've seen this with wokeness. It got a lot of social prestige. But what do we then do about that? If we are illiberal and we try to squash and banish these ideas, is that, even apart from the ethics of it, is that going to work better than letting it be there and addressing it? So I would take as an example from this country, the two ideas that have been tried to be squashed most recently are gender critical ideas and criticism of immigration. So we have seen the sort of woke establishment, or even the politically correct, not really woke, trying to be liberal but not managing it, really tried that these are the things that can't be speakable. So what has happened as a result of that? We've seen a massive rise of gender critical movement to the point that we're now called Turf Island. A big space has come with that. A lot of people have organised. Liberals have got behind it from their freedom thing. We have now changed a load of laws. We have gender critical views protected. We have shut down gender clinics. We have essentially, it mobilised people. And with criticism of immigration, people trying to make reasonable ones, that there can be cultural incompatibilities, that we do need to think about that we do need to preserve our liberal values, that it's not racist to say so. This being shut down as racist has resulted in reform coming from absolutely nowhere, zooming up in the popularity ratings in a way that is just absolutely unprecedented, to the point where it actually had more people saying they would vote for it than for anybody else. So this is the result of trying to squash certain ideas.
So within liberalism is it has a function of course correction within the system itself.
Yes.
So even though bad ideas will inevitably occur, or ideas that are ineffective,
yes,
it can self-correct.
Yes,
as opposed to non-liberal systems, they can't self-correct.
No, then you just get the rise
self-correct violently.
Yes, you get an orthodoxy taking control, and it keeps control until a marketplace of ideas, which is still working, even if it's not in the mainstream, actually gets enough support for another set of ideas, and then that bashes it aside violently. I mean, do we think, for example, that we would be at this, where we are now, where there have been violent riots because on the grounds of immigration, following the Axel Ruder-Cabana, the responses to that? Do we think that there would have been such a massive gender critical movement, and now there are authoritarians emerging within the gender critical movement who actually want to control what people say and what they can wear as well? Would this have happened if, rather than trying to get rid of those ideas by squashing them out, we had kept gender critical ideas in the mainstream? We had let people have discussions of, okay, so trans people wish to dress this way and identify this way. How can we make sure that this doesn't disadvantage women, make them unsafe, reduce their ability to compete fairly? If we'd kept that in the mainstream, they can say, yes, it's stupid and illiberal to judge people by the colour of their skin, but can we acknowledge that there are views in Islam, for example, which are antithetical to the rights of women, the rights of sexual minorities, the rights of religious minorities, Jews, freedom of speech, and the right to criticise religion? Can we actually address that? If we had kept those in the mainstream, if people, the mainstream media particularly, had been able to have arguments about this, would we have violent uprisings, very strong feelings? It seems almost impossible now that any kind of balance can be found between trans activists and gender critical feminists. They're just, one of them has to bash the other out of existence, because the time in which we could have said, yes, you may live as you see fit, we are still going to protect women's spaces and children's bodies based on evidence and reason. That's not a thing that can happen now. Now, one of them has to win.
So freedom of speech
Yes.
is fundamental.
We cannot guarantee that it will win, but all of the evidence shows that it has done so much better than trying to squash ideas out and putting one moral dominant orthodoxy in charge.
As hurty as hurty words said in free speech that they may be, to use Andrew Gold's term, it still is. It's less hurty than squashing them.
Yeah, we have to. It's very counterintuitive. I think there are certain things that you just, well, that is just so awful and so clearly wrong that it should not be said. You know, people who want to deny the Holocaust, for example, you just sort of, there are no grounds for allowing people to do that. It is factually false, and it contributes to the rise of anti-Semitism, which we have seen is very, very dangerous. We must ban that. But what happens when people try to ban that is that we get this thing, well, this is the truth that they don't want you to know. We are being oppressed. We get this glamour attached to this narrative of this oppressed group. It gains power.
It's sort of punk to think these ideas.
Yes, whereas if you had kept that in there, okay, so this group is questioning the Holocaust. Let's get a lot of people together, historians, various, and let's have this discussion. And then anybody who's wondering whether there's any truth in that can actually have a look at the different arguments. Now, some people will still go away saying, those people who said a Holocaust to happen are in the pay of the Jews. But the majority of us won't. They will think, okay, yeah, that's a solid.
So, are you hopeful for the West?
No, not
Really?
I in the long term, I hope I can be. I have fits of a great despondency at the moment because I keep addressing various aspects of things, and irrationalism is escalating. Illiberalism is becoming seen as much more of a norm. Views that were considered extreme now are being more and more mainstreamed. I think we are.
Or the inverse of this, which is I find views that are highly reasonable and rational sound extreme.
Yes.
You know, it's quite when I'm in a sort of a leftist milieu, I mention freedom of speech. I'm very self-conscious about it because it feels like I'm a extreme right winger.
Yeah. And that we are seeing the mainstreaming of illiberalism.
To be clear. Sorry.
And that does worry me. I don't see a simmering down of this happening anytime soon. Often when I'm in sort of text messaging friends, and I really do feel very despondent because I've written something and then a whole load of people have deluged me with total irrationalism, completely missing the point, justification of either illiberal populist right things or illiberal woke left things or illiberal gender critical things. And they're just, people are genuinely not grasping. It's not that they understand that the principle of letting people believe, live, speak as they see fit, provided it harms no one else nor denies them the same freedom, but they reject it. They intuitively do not have a grasp of it. They are...
Yes, it was counterintuitive in a sense.
Yes. They see...
We're not taught it.
No.
So how would we know it? I've never been taught this stuff. I've just discovered it through my own curiosity. So, yeah.
I think for a long time we have had this consensus of if it's not hurting you, leave them alone, live and let live, which is the essence of the liberal thing. But as we've got now more of a sense of danger, there's an existential kind of fear that is growing, and this causes people to kind of retreat into their sort of collectivist,
The tribal selves.
yes, then I am speaking more and more to people who don't even see that what I am arguing for is liberalism. So when
They misinterpret you.
they can only see there's a blinkered worldview now, where if I am criticising an aspect of the woke, I must be right wing. And
Yes, I have the same thing within friends. People completely misunderstand. If you say this is black, they think you're saying it's white.
they do not, they cannot.
They literally think that. It's quite bizarre.
They're not just using hyperbole and trying to kind of demonize you. They really can't see it. And I will find that I'm saying, well, this behaviour, say on the populist right this time, is illiberal. Then I will get 100 people saying, do you not realise the woke left is illiberal? Yes, please look at my work for the last 10 years. Can we try to see that this can be at the same time? Or sometimes I just get very impatient and say, well, thank goodness only one group of people can be illiberal and unreasonable at the same time. And it is exhausting, because you at least need them to be able to see it. But when quite often it is trans activists and gender critical feminists who really sort of encapsulate this perfectly, where they just. I saw once there was a group of gender critical feminists who were going to do a podcast on me, and they got together to examine my work and try to work out what my ethics were. They suspected that I was a trans activist, and they were trying to discover it. And they were she sort of believes that people should be able to dress as they want, but she doesn't believe that that men should be able to go in women's spaces. What can explain this?
Yeah.
Harm. The liberal theories of harm, freedom. Are you harming anybody? Are you denying anybody's freedom? Okay, carry on. And it's so simple. This basic liberal principle is so simple, and people are literally not seeing it at all. And so, no, I am not hopeful. I often write to a friend that I'm speaking to about this one of many, where I just say, well, I'm just going to. I want to go and live in a cave with dogs and detach from society altogether, but I'm just going to keep writing things. I am not confident that in my lifetime we're going to have a resurgence of liberalism, but all I can hope is that if I leave enough writing, then if this does happen, if people do reach a crunch point and they want to sort of reinvigorate liberalism, then I will have left something.
Well, that is an awesome thing. Personally, I think optimism is the best strategy, because we don't know what the future holds. It can turn out negatively or it can turn out positively, but it is I think what you're doing is fantastic. I could talk to you all day, but we should stop here. But so thank you for all your work, but we have to end on one thing. Something you're famous for. How do you make a proper British cup of tea?
Thank you. Good. I think
this is probably the most. I left it to last because it's the most important.
Yes.
Philosophical question of the day.
I think I might make it a rule that to go on a podcast, everybody has to ask me this. And then they have to clip it, and then they have to...
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And this could be the first one, the leading way. Have you been asked this before?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not original.
I'm asked this often,
Okay.
or I am just insulted and told
And they
that...
don't ask.
They tell me that Texas, the last one told me that Texas makes the best tea with much ice and sugar.
Heresy. People like that should be banned.
Yes.
Anyway, so here it is.
Okay, so to make a proper cup of tea, ideally you need a teapot. You could, if you need to use tea bags, you can. So in an emergency, so I will cover that. But what you should do
in an extreme emergency. Yeah.
So you boil a kettle with fresh water, and then you take a teapot. The teapot should be of a size for 2 cups per person. So I have a 4-cup teapot because there are 2 of us in our house who drink tea. So you warm the pot by pouring some of the boiling water in it, swishing it around, then put in 1 teaspoon of tea for each cup that you're going to make and 1 for the pot, so 5 in a 4-cup teapot. Then you pour the boiling water on top of that, make sure it is boiling, and you cover it over. You put a tea cosy on it to keep the heat in, double cozying.
That's double cozying.
Double cozying is preferable.
Right.
And to make
I've never heard that concept.
No, well, my mother said that she had a friend who was housekeeper to the Queen, and she said she insisted upon it.
Right.
Yes,
So this is from upon high.
yes, this comes from the top authorities, but just test for yourself: double cozying versus not double cozying empiricism. And so you then leave it for 5 minutes. You can then you pour the tea. So George Orwell always argued that you need to pour the tea in first, and then you add the milk, so that you can make sure the colour is right. I think that's a little bit too pernickety. It doesn't matter as long as the milk does not touch the tea while it is brewing, as long as the brewing happens first. So I put the milk in first, you add the tea, then generally about 6 minutes later it is the perfect temperature to drink. You can then top up your pot by adding another spoon and filling it up with water. If you have to use tea bags, same principle, but make sure that the boiling water and the tea are thoroughly brewed first. Remove the tea bag before adding the milk. When you made me a cup of tea, you asked if I should leave the tea bag in there. So obviously you are dead to me, and I'll never respect anything you said again. But that is a general rule, and you can have an adequate cup of tea if you're on the move and you have to do it quickly. Have a tea bag; it's better than nothing. But ideally, get a pot.
So out of 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the absolute extreme worst, how did the cup of tea rate? And you've got to remember that we're in extreme circumstances here because this is an Airbnb. I don't have my normal setup.
Okay, well, I shall tell you that the 2 points that if this was a tea making exam, you would have failed on 2 grounds. And that was that you produced hot water from some kind of...
From a magical machine.
Yes.
Yes, from out of the hot water out of the tap.
Yes.
Which is too modern.
Well, it will have been boiled before, so it will be...
Freshly boiled.
Exactly. That's why I said put the fresh water in the kettle, boil it up straight away, and then empty it out before you do the next one, the freshly boiled water. And then you did sort of, say... how much do I have to stir it for, and should I put the milk in now? So those are like if it was a driving
inadequacy.
If it was a driving test, you would have failed. But those would be those 2 points against you. But generally, you brewed the tea to the right extent. The water was boiling. The amount of milk that you added was so the end result was a solid 6 out of 10.
And it's pretty good for first go.
Yes, when I'm
in an Airbnb.
When I'm Empress of the world, I would not automatically send you to the gulag.
Right.
I would give you notice to improve.
Right.
And as long as you fix those 2 errors, you would be allowed to live.
Well, I am so relieved. And if we ever do another podcast, which I would dearly love to, because there's like another 20 hours of material we could get through, I will be much more prepared. So thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you, Michael.
To help the Shape of Dialogue grow, please subscribe, like and comment and share it to all and sundry. Many thanks.